Hi, Robin. Thanks a lot for being here. Nice
Good morning.
Or good
My
evening.
pleasure. Or good evening. Yeah, depending on where you are.
So, first of all, let me just say, Robin Finn is a leading expert on helping women find and share their voices to live more creative and joyful lives. She's an award-winning writer and the founder of Heart, Soul, Pen, writing workshops for women, and the online Women's Writing Den. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Los Angeles Times, and she is the author of the novel Restless in LA. And I'm really pleased that you've accepted my invitation to have this conversation, Robin. So we've had it
thank you
before, haven't we? And I really enjoyed that conversation, so I'm looking forward to today.
Me too.
So, so can I ask you first and foremost then, how you got started writing?
Well, it's an interesting question. I would say that I was really always a writer from childhood, but at some point, I'd say like in my 20s, for whatever reason, I stopped writing. And I didn't write again for really almost 20 years. And what happened for me was that when my second son was born, he had severe hyperactivity, and I had to deal with a lot of parent judging and people being very unaccepting, and it was very painful for me. And I wrote an essay about my son and I being kicked out of Mommy and Me when he was 18 months old, which is true. It's a personal essay. And that sort of opened this floodgate of me writing about my experiences, parenting, struggling with having a kid who had special needs, struggling with, the experience of my community. It was so painful. And I found through writing, not only was it therapeutic for me, but I started to really be able to reach so many other people. And that just created for me so much healing.
Mm.
So I really started writing when I was struggling with parenting. That's really what started my writing again.
Mm-hmm. And so what does your writing process look like? Is it a daily thing that you do? How does it work for you?
Well, it's interesting. I commit every week to how much writing I'm going to do as a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So my usual commitment is 3 times a week for 15 minutes. Of course, once I sit down, my writing can be 3 hours, but I don't like to tell myself that because it's too intimidating. Mm-hmm. So I try to keep my commitments really small, and I commit on Mondays, and then on Monday I reflect about whether I did it or not, and I adjust. But typically I go for 3 times a week for a minimum of 15 minutes, and then I just let it take as long as it does.
Yeah, I really like that. I've not heard of anybody do that before. I mean, 15 minutes doesn't sound like much, does it? But I bet you can write a lot in 15 minutes.
Well, it's really interesting because I say to my students, if you write even once a week for 15 minutes, after 52 weeks, you will be amazed at the amount of material. And just that idea of like letting whatever time you have be enough. And for me, when I say 15 minutes, it seems so not intimidating, but mostly, Maria, it turns into like a minimum of an hour. Yeah. But it's just too scary to say like I have to find an hour. So I just tell myself I'm going to sit down for 15 minutes, and a lot of times that'll go into sometimes several hours.
Yeah. I can see how that would be really liberating for people. Because I think sometimes people think they have to write for hours and hours on end every day in order to be able to produce something of any value. So.
I know, and it's such a head trip, and it's not true. And so many of the people I work with are women, and women are often caregivers. They could be mom writers. They might have parents they're caring for, even their animals, and they're always busy caring for other people. Mm-hmm. And that's why I try to really encourage people to make the commitment so small you cannot not do it, even if it's once a week for 5 minutes. Yeah. You're going to sit down and do your writing, because often it blossoms into much longer, and it feels like a commitment that is doable instead of another to do. I think we all have enough to-dos,
Yes, yeah. Does your writing practice differ when you're writing a book or when you've got an article that you're writing? Does it change or is it the same?
Well, it changes. What I'm sharing with you is kind of like my regular writing practice. But when I wrote Restless in LA, I like to say, and this is true, like I wrote in my robe, no teeth brush, no mail gotten. I would drop off my kids in my robe through the carpool line, bye, and like kind of hope no one saw me. I would drop them off at 8, come home, write until 3. And I'd realize I'm starving. The mail isn't, I haven't done anything, but it was like the story came to me, and I call it the divine download. And I feel like when you're in that place where you're really, something is coming to you so powerfully and you just feel like you're just typing up something that's downloading from somewhere else, I feel like that is the best, most amazing feeling as a writer. And when that happens, just go with it. So I can't say that's happened since then, but when I wrote the novel, I wrote all day, every day for about 9 months. And I just didn't do anything but feed the people who lived in my house. That was about it.
Yeah. Oh, I really know that feeling. I had a similar experience with my first book. And like I didn't have kids to drop off at school even. So like I would get up, I wouldn't shower, I wouldn't do anything. I would just get up. And I was getting up even earlier than I would normally do because I'm not an early person. And I'd wake up really early and then that'd be it. I'd be up and like start writing and that'd be me there for the whole day.
And I would realize at 3, I'm so hungry, but yes. It was just like, it just, when you're in that place, and I have 3 kids and they were younger at the time of when I was writing the book. So my husband gifted me the gift of being able to take I did several weekends where I went to a hotel where when I was just so under pressure, like I could feel the story and I just wanted to write. So I would check in on Friday, write all day, write all Saturday, check out on Sunday and come home all happy because I got to have that time to just work.
Oh yeah, that's so nice. Yeah, I was very blessed as well. Ash was he basically talks about he's a widow when I'm writing a book.
I love that. He's a novel widow. That's awesome. But I mean, that particular experience, like that went on for 9 months. And I can't say that I've had that experience since I wrote the novel, but I have many experiences when I'm really involved in like a personal essay where I might just be focused on it for 2 days until it's done. And then I write all day. And, it's just, it feels easy.
Yeah.
It feels easy. Yeah. And that to me, like as a writer, when something feels easy, it's just such a joy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't always feel easy,
No. So I want to come back to that not always feeling easy because that's a definite question that I want to ask you about. But just following on from the writing of the book, what have you got to say about the editing process? How does that look for you?
Well, I think that's such a good question. And I can just say that in my work with writers, I often feel that people edit way too soon. I really divide up the writing process into 2 different processes. Right. The experience of really allowing the story or whatever it is to come forward in a really joyful way, just not judging it, just letting it come. And it doesn't always make sense and you don't even know what you're writing. And a lot of times it's not chronologic at all. You get one piece, another, and just letting it come. And then the second part is the editing. And I feel like a lot of people get into editing way too soon. To me, allowing the story to come forward is its own process and you don't need to edit. In fact, it's so much more helpful not to edit. Just let it come and experience the joy of being creative and having this kind of, story come to you. And then when that's over, I feel like that's the time where it's really helpful to edit, to revise, to put things together, to use your brain, to make decisions. And then of course, if I am working with someone who's interested in getting a literary agent or wants to move forward with a manuscript or piece of work, I would always always recommend that they have their piece professionally edited before work is sent out to get a literary agent. That's all down the road, but I do think editing is very important, just in its proper place.
Yeah. So you do your own editing by the sounds of it first, and then get somebody else involved.
Yes, when I do my own work, I edit it and edit it and edit it until I can't stand it anymore.
All
And
right.
I'm like, whatever's wrong, I can't fix. Like, I've taken it as far as I can, and then I'll ask for fresh eyes, either another writer friend, or at some point I might ask an editor to actually really look at my work.
Mm-hmm.
But first I go through it really until I can't stand it. And then I'm like, I don't want to look at this again.
And what are you looking for when you're doing the editing? What kinds of things are you looking for to revise?
Well, for me, because I really believe in allowing your creative process free flowing space, when I'm looking at something I've written, the first thing I do is see what is really not related. Like, sometimes I have pieces coming in that just don't fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of that I will take out and actually put somewhere else. And that may actually be a whole nother essay that's bubbling up, but it's not part of this essay.
Yeah,
so the first thing I do is I really look for content-wise for, like, what's totally really random and needs to not be part of this essay.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I get down to what is the meat of what I want to say, then of course it's just the process of, does it make sense? A lot of times the way things come out in my first pass, it's not necessarily structured in a way that I think would be most helpful for a reader.
Yeah.
So I may go back and move things around. Also, when I'm writing, I don't stop to think of the right word. I just write XX and keep going. So a lot of times I have to go back in. Yeah, a lot of times I have to go back in and think, like, what was that word? Because I don't want to stop myself and think about it while I'm writing. But in my editing, I will really spend time trying to figure out, like, what was it I was trying to say? Mm-hmm. So for me, it's a process of cleaning it up, making sure everything goes together, and just looking at it from a reader point of view. And does this make sense? Does this have a through line? Does it have a beginning, middle, and end? So that's the kind of thing I would do in my editing.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. So you touched on earlier, I call it gremlins. I can't remember what word you use now. So what are the gremlins that you get while you're in your, whenever any of your writing, what kind of things gets in your way?
I also call it the gremlin. I think those are international, Maria, right? I think the gremlins for me will say things like, nobody really cares about this. This is stupid. You're wasting your time. What are you going to do with this? It's sort of like a theme around, like, what you're writing isn't important, and no one cares. And no one cares. That seems to be my gremlin's favorite thing that it likes to tell me is, nobody cares about this and you're wasting your time. And, I think every writer to some extent has a gremlin.
Yeah. I think it might.
And I like to say, you what?
I think it might even be the same one.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. Well, I have a visual of my gremlin. He has black hair and a gold tooth and a top hat. And he literally just sits there on my shoulder, just na 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 na. And I like to say that, you can't really ever get rid of your gremlins, but you can distract them. So my gremlin likes to play Xbox and eat cookies. So I literally have a visual in my mind of sitting him in front of the Xbox, giving him the controllers, the plate of cookies. And then when he's distracted, I write. So I kind of have accepted that is a voice that I hear. And I don't have to believe it. The old saying, you don't have to believe everything you think.
Yeah.
I just think that's so funny and true.
Yeah.
So I hear it, but I don't have to believe it. So I just choose to have fun with it and give it, cookies and an Xbox and just let it go do its thing. and then I'm going to do my thing, which is writing.
Brilliant. Okay. So where did the idea come from? From the you published Restless in LA. Where did that idea come from?
Well, that's a great question. Restless in LA, I was in a writing group, and I was writing every week, and I didn't really know what I was writing. I was writing my own personal rants, and I was writing my own experience a lot with my son. And at some point, it moved from the writing group to home, where I was just writing about this and writing about this and writing about this. And I like to say, and it's true, that I think I was halfway through the novel when I realized I was writing a novel. And I'm so grateful, because I think if I had known I was writing a novel, I wouldn't have written it. I would have immediately been like, no, I can't write a novel, I'm frozen. But since I didn't know, it was about halfway done when I realized, I think I'm in the middle of a novel.
Brilliant.
And so part of the novel has to do with a woman who has 3 children, one of whom has severe ADHD. And that's the part that, for me, a lot of that grew out of my own personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's fiction, and it takes a turn when the main character, Alex Hoffman, reconnects with her old love from college and throws a whole bomb into her marriage, and that's all fiction. But it was really fun to write about.
Yeah.
And just to explore these themes about, like, what does it mean to be a midlife person and have a life, and then have something happen that really calls into question everything that you thought you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Did you learn much about yourself while you were writing it?
That's a really good question. I think I learned I think I learned about myself as a writer,
mm-hmm.
which was, honestly, Maria, I just didn't think I had it in me to write a novel.
Right.
I just didn't think I had it in me, and I learned that I did, and that was pretty exciting. I think if you had asked me before I wrote it, could you ever write a novel, my answer would have been emphatically no.
Yeah, no, I get that, because I've never thought that I could write a novel, and I haven't done. But I'm seeing more and more in some of my writing that it's possible for me to write fiction. Like, I'm seeing that with I know you've done some of Jack Grape's method writing classes, and I've been doing that with Jules, and sometimes some of the pieces have come out that are pure fiction, and I've never thought I was capable of that. So it's fascinating, isn't it?
It's fascinating. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think we know what we're capable of, but we certainly have a comfort zone. And it's like, whatever your comfort zone is, you feel like that's what I write. But I guess I found out my novel's also very steamy. And so I found out, like, oh, I like writing these really steamy scenes. It was really fun. And it was really funny, because I was really kind of embarrassed, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm writing all about sex. And as I was doing this, 50 Shades came out.
Oh, right, yes.
Right, and I was like, oh, I'm liberated now. My writing coach said, sex sells, keep writing. So it felt like the timing worked to make me feel better. But I mean, so I discovered, like, oh, that I really enjoy steamy writing. I enjoy these themes of midlife. I enjoy fiction. All these things that I thought of myself as a personal essayist.
Mm.
And so I think from writing the novel, my sphere of understanding myself as a writer grew, where now I would say I still love personal essay. I'm also a novelist. And I think, I mean, like, there's lots of things I would like to write. I think when you're a writer, actually, you just like to write. Well, at least for me. Yeah. But it's like we make this little cage and say, like, this is what we write. But I'm not sure if that's actually true.
Mm.
I mean, it's interesting that you're sharing about, like, writing fiction.
Mm. Yeah, I think, I mean, that's one of the big things for me from doing the Jack Grape's method writing, has been about how expanded my writing has become compared to, I mean, I used to write, a bit like you, I used to write all the time, but I never wrote to publish at all. It was always only for my own personal consumption, for want of a better word. But yeah, that's really opened up for me. It's like how much more you can write, how much more you're capable of, like you've just said. So
Yeah, how much more you're capable of. But I love the idea of what you're saying about writing for yourself, because I think it's really, for me, it was really important for me to feel always like I was writing for myself. And I continue to always feel like I'm writing for myself, because I know once I start thinking I'm writing for someone else, it really that encourages the gremlin. He comes back, nah, 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 they don't care. It's like, well, I'm writing for me, and that's enough.
yeah.
And then once it's written, I can decide like what I want to do with it. But I think I always have to think for myself that I'm really writing for my own personal self-expression. And because writers write, that's what we do. So it makes me happy. And I try not to think about like I'm writing for some readership, because that just somehow really inhibits me.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I do that. Like this afternoon, I've written an article for coaches, and I purposely sat down and did that. But the stuff that I do, like my writing practice is first thing in the morning, and the things that I write first thing in the morning, I'm like you, like I'll write it and then afterwards decide whether I'm going to do anything with it. And a lot of it nothing happens with it. And I remember writing one piece that is so un-PC, like I never publish it because it is no way a reflection of how I think about life. And it would be so embarrassing if I thought people thought that I would do this, but it astounded me that I wrote it in the first place.
Well, I mean, I think that is really interesting, Maria. And that's why I feel like there's two different parts of the writing process. For me, there is like, I like to tell women that I write with in Heart Soul Pen that I think that your writing comes from your body, not your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you write without judging and you write freely, it just kind of falls out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part where you really get to creatively self-express.
Mm.
And I think that is a joyful and just so important as a person to be creative. Then the second part is with your brain.
Mm.
That's like the editing, revising, and to your point, deciding whether you want to publish something.
Yeah.
I might find like I wrote some deep, dark secret, and that's just not something I want to share. So, okay, that's going in the not to be shared pile. But sometimes you'll find that you wrote something very important, something that is really reflective of what's happening in our world or what's happening with you. And it's very powerful to share that. And I find in my work, particularly with women, they seem to think that it's like they have to climb Mount Everest to have something important to share. And that is just not true.
Yeah. So on the subject of sharing, what was it like for you when you first started sharing your work? Because I know that's really intimidating for a lot of people.
I'd say terrifying. When I first, I think one of the first personal essays I ever published, I think it was for it might have been Mama Load, or it was a mother parenting thing about my son and I with ADHD. And they asked me for a picture. And I looked on their website and it looked like the pictures were like thumbnails. So I sent them a picture. And then when it launched, this is like my first personal essay, I clicked on it and the picture was like this size, like of my face. And I was just filled with self-loathing.
Oh.
That's how I felt. Like I just hated myself. I don't really know what that was about, but it was like this feeling of unworthiness or embarrassment.
It wasn't actually to do with the writing, though, by the sounds of it. The sharing.
It was more about exposure.
Mm-hmm.
It was exposing myself. It didn't even have to do with what I was writing about. It was the fact that I was writing about anything and like showing up.
Yeah.
As opposed to being more hidden.
Yeah.
And that these are like these lessons that come to us. But what happened at that piece is I was flooded with emails from parents thanking me, and that built up my confidence to write another piece.
Yeah.
And I'd say the first year or two, every time something came out, I felt horrified. But eventually I didn't. Eventually I let go of that, and I just decided, I'm going to be me, and I'm going to do me, and I'm good with it, and I'm just going to be okay with people having whatever responses they have. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of places that you publish personal essay, they have comments, and like comments can be really intense because sometimes they're supportive, but a lot of times there's not.
Yeah. And so what do you do about that? Do you just ignore them, or do you read them even, or do you?
I wish I could say, Maria, that I don't read them, but I do read them, but I never respond. I never, ever respond. And sometimes the really crazy ones, I post on my personal Facebook page to share with my friends. And that is always so much fun because the feedback is, because I really have gotten some people who just, I call them ADHD deniers, but particularly in the ADHD pieces, some people would be just so offended about, my parenting or whatever. It was very personal. So those ones that are really filled with upset, I post on my personal Facebook page and share them.
Brilliant.
And it really turns into the best laugh. And that's the best way to just defuse it, is to just share it with people and laugh, because there's always going to be those people who feel the need to tell you that they don't like your writing.
Yeah. But it also sounds like predominantly people, it helps people, or they open up to what you've said. That's what it sounded like. I don't know.
That's how, for sure, the amount of people who've written to me to thank me, or to say that they see their situation in mine has really inspired me. Now I write much less about that, but I still write personal essay, and I write a lot about what's going on in my own life. And I think for some people, it's helpful to see their own experiences reflected back in somebody else.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was for me. It's like when I started posting the daily yarns, what was really funny, because sometimes the daily yarns are it's like the emotional roller coaster of the lockdown. So I was writing about the same thing for you, what was going on for me every day during the lockdown. And, it was quite an emotional time. So, but what was really fascinating, fortunately, I didn't really get any negative comments, but what I mostly got was, "Oh, Maria, you're okay, don't worry," and all this kind of thing. And then I had to start saying to people, when I posted them, "I'm okay." This is just what happened yesterday, and and all this kind of thing. And then people started kind of saying, "Oh God, yeah, me too. Yeah, I feel like that way too. And you've put into words something that I've been feeling, and I haven't been able to express." And that for me was kind of, that made it easier, or makes it easier to share more in the world, because there's more people for whom they see themselves in your writing than there is people who have some kind of judgment or criticism about it.
Yes, for sure. And I think, we also live in a world with social media and such where there's a lot of inauthentic posting and sharing going on, and it can be really painful for people. And I think being willing to be really authentic and honest on the page is really a gift you give other people. And if it resonates for them, wonderful. And if it makes them feel less alone, that's so wonderful. And if it doesn't, no problem. Like I don't think a writer can write for everyone. You're writing for whom, for whom it resonates.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, no problem.
But
I know. Go ahead.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I know for me, like, I had a really funny experience where my daughter walked in on my husband and I when we were in a romantic moment, and I ended up writing an essay about it one day, and I was laughing so hard at this essay that I just decided to send it out, and that essay ended up in the New York Times, and that was one of the most popular essays for like 3 days. And I mean, I had so much fun with the comments, because people all talked about how their kids walked in on them, they walked in on their parents. It was so much laughter.
Yeah.
And so I consider myself to some extent a humor writer. And I think, just being able to laugh at ourselves and the things that happen in our lives, we're all human. This was very embarrassing. And of course, it was in the New York Times. And my daughter, who was 13 at the time, was really taking ownership. She's like, yeah, believe me, I'm scarred for life. She, like it became a whole family thing. And
Oh,
it was just really a great, funny experience that so many people related to. And I guess that I'm bringing it up just to say that there's really not much that could happen to us that people as humans can't relate to. They, shame, humor, feeling abandoned, feeling loved. I mean, so I think it's such a wonderful thing in so many ways to just be willing to share your experience and let other people connect with it.
yeah, I love that. So I'm just really conscious of time now, but I wanted to ask you definitely about one thing, because I know that you've got an agent, haven't you, a literary agent? So I wondered if you would just talk a bit about that and how you got your agent, how that works for you, etc.
Oh, okay. I'm actually working with, I love my agent, but I'm working with my third agent. So I'll just tell you that when I was sending out my novel, I sent out to my message to people sending out for novels, don't give up, because it does take a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say I got the agent for my novel, maybe like my 50th query letter.
Right.
And then I got an agent for the novel, and I was so excited. I thought, this is going to be the beginning of everything. And what happened in that situation was, it was like I just didn't have any communication with this particular agent. She just wasn't getting back to me. I didn't understand who was on the list, what was happening. And I mean, this went on for like 6 months. And eventually I ended up in a group of authors, and I was sharing my experience, and they all told me, you gotta fire your agent. It was like, fire my agent. I just worked so hard to get an agent.
Yes.
But it just, unfortunately, it just wasn't a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
So I did ultimately end that relationship, and I published Restless in LA with a small publisher, and I didn't use an agent.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had an idea for a book proposal, which is nonfiction. So it wasn't a manuscript, it was a proposal. And I sent that out, and I got an agent, and she was lovely, and she communicated with me great, but unfortunately she did not sell my book. So here I got a second agent. I'm so happy. This is the beginning. Okay, she didn't sell the book. It wasn't her fault. She was great. It just didn't sell.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very disappointing. And then I have an idea for a third book, and I decided to look for another agent. Now I have a new agent, and I don't even have a proposal yet. I have an agent that I really like. We're going to work together, and I'm working on my proposal. But I guess what I'd say is that finding an agent is, I think it's a process. I think that it's helpful for writers to go into it with an expectation that this is going to take a while.
Mm-hmm.
Do not get discouraged. It really can take 50 or more query letters, because you're looking for, it's almost like a love match. It's like looking for a spouse or something. I mean, you're looking for someone who falls in love with your work enough that they want to put their time and effort and really their money, because they're going to be working for you.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't get paid unless they sell your book,
Yeah.
behind you. So if they don't connect with your work, I just encourage people not to take it personally. You gotta like kiss a lot of toads. You gotta go through a lot of different people before you may find someone who says, I really connect with this manuscript and I want to represent you.
Yeah.
So I really encourage people not to give up, and also to just know that even if you do get an agent, it's still a process, because they have to shop and then sell your book. And they may not, particularly if it's a first book, they may not, and that's okay. You just have to keep going.
Yeah.
So my experience is really to look at agent shopping as a process, and not to allow it to discourage you if it takes time. And of course, if you are sending out a manuscript, have it professionally edited before you send it out to the different agent. for
Yeah.
sure, because you get one chance for them to look at your material and you want it to shine.
Yes.
But I think that and then it's still the publishing industry is so weird, Maria. It's like even if you get a wonderful agent, you still may not sell your book, and you just have to keep going.
Mm. Lovely. So just one last thing then. If I was to ask you for one tip that you would offer to budding writers, would it be something that you said already, or would there be something else?
One tip for budding writers. I'm sure I've said it already, but as I'm thinking, I guess what I would say is to write for yourself and to share your writing only, especially your new writing, in a supportive environment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think new writers in particular, but really all writers, need support, and that your writing is not always ready for critique.
Mm-hmm.
You need to develop just the skill of actually having a regular writing practice, sharing your work, having confidence, and that takes a nurturing community. And so I would just encourage writers to be in a nurturing community and to keep writing.
Okay.
That's the most important thing, is to keep writing.
Lovely. No, I really like that, and I like the idea of what you said about putting it first when you first put your work out there to somebody or somewhere that's supportive, because you don't want to be jumping straight in with a full-on beating up.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and to just really respect that like new fresh material needs space to grow. It doesn't need to be over critiqued. That's such a great way to get shut down. Like, I think letting your fresh material grow and develop, and then you edit it, you revise it, and really being sure, like, now I'm ready for feedback, and not before then.
Yeah. Okay. So before we finish then, Robin, I've been so enjoyed this conversation. It's been really lovely. Thank you so much. And you talked about community of writers, and I know you have a community of writers. So do you want to say something about how people can be part of your community, the things that you're up to, and how people can get hold of you?
Thank you. I'm Robin Finn, and you can always find me at robin@robinfinn.com. My writing classes for women can also be found at heartsoulpen.com. And the last thing I'd say is I recently launched a women's writing den online, where we are writing, sharing, getting creative, and being in community with other people on their time. So it really doesn't matter what your time zone is, how many kids you have, if you work full time, because you can come in there and post and get feedback on your time. That's called the Women's Writing Den, and that's at womenswritingden.com or robinfinn.com. And I just think being in community is such a wonderful way to be a writer, to be in community with other writers. So if that's something of interest, feel free to reach out to me.
Lovely. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Robin. I really appreciate it. I've had such a great time with you this evening, your morning.
Me too, Maria. Yeah. My morning, Yuri. Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome.